Hello, this is Mari again, doing my audio reflection on being connected. I hope I get through all this. I had a lot of thoughts about this reading. And first, I really want to go into the context of the reading because I think it really influences and influence my reading of the text. So, first of all, the author wrote this. He was French. He wrote this in 1950, and it was described to be an anthropologic study. And I think the writing obviously is strongly situated from a Western perspective. For example, he refers to the societies he's going to be talking about as backward, primitive, archaic. But I guess given the time frame in the 50s, that's not necessarily unusual. But I think those loaded words cloud the scientific priority to be neutral. I also thought it was really interesting that the reading starts with a Scandinavian poem, um, but the poem is used to describe the ideas of Polynesian or Maori culture. And even the definition of a gift is kind of from a Western perspective, meaning, from the West, something given voluntarily without payment in return. But in the quote unquote primitive definition, it's generously given, even when there may be social deceit or where there is an obligation and economic self-interest. So just from that context, set up for me a negative perception of where the author was going. In terms of the subcontext of the reading, I thought it was very interesting that he said that the purpose of the study was to see the morality that operates in the giving of gifts in these quote unquote primitive societies, to be able to note that, quote, this morality still functions in our Western societies. And I see this not as purely a study of a different way of life, but as a way to kind of prove the morality that's hidden in Western societies. But I think it's important to remember that this was written at a time immediately following World War II, a time where the world was in need of healing, searching for healing, especially in France, where a great deal of the fighting took place. So although it seems to me that this writing wasn't purely about scientific, what can we learn about these communities, but the subtext was what can we learn and to apply to our current situation. Let's see what else. One other thing that stuck out to me was before he even really goes into talking about gifts, he says societies that are studied that precede our own, quote unquote, which I interpreted to mean Western. All their institutions are intermingled and cannot be separated but expressed at the same time. So the religious, the judicial, the moral, politics, family, economic, they cannot be separated. And that's very different from our own Western perspective. I have issue with that. If you just look at our current political system, you can see that all of those elements are in a relation and expressed at the same time. If you take, for example, abortion, there's obviously strong religious components. The Supreme Court has been active in this area. Of course, politicians, many of them coming from a moral perspective, have issues with abortion. Of course, there's a family perspective and obviously economic perspective. So I have issue with him even saying that quote unquote primitive societies have all these things intermingled and cannot be separated. But in reality, Western societies are that way as well. So moving on from context, the theme of obligation to give and receive really piqued my interest, particularly the passage that says, one gives because the recipient possesses some kind of right of property over anything that belongs to the donor. So I first kind of struggled with how to separate a gift from an obligation. And I just came to the conclusion that it means that no one really owns anything, but holds it for a time before cultural standards demand he pass it along to another who will also hold it for a time, and the process continues. So I try to take that interpretation and make some type of connection to, you know, current, I guess, Western standards or what's happening currently. And I thought about universities where individuals make gifts, quote unquote, to the university, and these gifts are not seen as an obligation of the alumni for perhaps the gift of learning or perhaps the wealth they received as a result of attending the university. But they're a gift in exchange for recognition of some type, of some kind, usually naming rights of a building or something like that. And I asked myself, okay, is that a gift? And of course, I say no according to Western standards, and also no according to Maori standards, where, again, gifts are seen as this property that is somewhat communal in some ways. So moving on from that, I tried to see how this reading applied to our exercise in EdChat and what the gift of EdChat was about. And I thought the gift was best described by this passage about Maori law that says that the gift presented by the giver possesses something of himself, that there's a spiritual element of gift giving. And this sense was made evident to me when I spoke with a teacher who participated in EdChat. And when I asked her why she participated, the words she kept using were sharing. And so applying the descriptions from the mouse reading, this means the gift of, I interpreted this means the gift of sharing of oneself with no sense of obligation, but a gift of one's own experience, one's own learning, one's own heart, meaning they're caring for each other within the EdChat community. One's shared love of teaching as an educator and sharing that love with others. So that's the connection I made between the two readings, and I really was excited and learned a lot from being able to talk to an educator who uses EdChat as a tool for what is often called collaboration, but I can see now is a gift. Thank you for listening.